What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking all about rapid fire in Black Ops 3. I'm going to be breaking it down for each weapon type, and whether or not I feel it's worth it for each weapon type. We're going to be looking at the math, as well as my opinions on this matter. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so let's get into what exactly rapid fire does, because there are a few misconceptions out there, and it is a little bit confusing if you're just looking at fire rates themselves and not the actual fire time. So what rapid fire does is it decreases your fire time by 6%. This is why we don't see like a flat percentage increase to your rate of fire numbers. So for instance, if you have like a 700 round per minute gun, it isn't increased by like a flat 6 or 7% or anything like that. Every gun seems to have a different percentage. That's because it's the fire time itself that's being directly manipulated, not the fire rate itself. That just happens as a result of your fire time being decreased by the 6%. So just in case you guys aren't aware, fire time is just the time it takes between each of your shots. So for instance, the Man of War has a fire time of 0.116 seconds, or 116 milliseconds. That's without rapid fire. When you put rapid fire on that, we decrease that by 6%, and we get 0.109, or 109 milliseconds. This increases our rate of fire from 517 rounds per minute up to 550 rounds per minute. So now that we have our bases covered on what exactly rapid fire does to these guns, I want to break them down into different groups. So we're going to have full auto, we're going to have burst guns, we're going to have semi-auto, and then we're going to have the rechamber guns. And the rechamber guns are going to be like the KRM, the Argus, the Locust, and the SVG, for instance. So starting it off with full auto, I'm not going to go into every single one of these guns because that would just be a whole lot of numbers and math, and this video is already going to contain enough of that, and I don't want to completely bore you. I realize for some people this isn't the most exciting stuff, but it's good to get the facts out there. So for full auto guns, it's kind of interesting that the higher the fire rate, the less time you save between shots, if we're just talking milliseconds and not percentages. So for instance, if we compare the Vesper to the Man of War, they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum for full auto guns. The Vesper has an extremely high fire rate, and it only saves you 3 milliseconds between each shot, if you have rapid fire equipped. Whereas with the Man of War, we save 7 milliseconds between each shot because that fire time is higher. So to break this down even further, in a perfect scenario with the Man of War, it's going to take you 3 shots to kill, and only 3 shots to kill. Now in order to find how much time this is saving us to kill, our first shot doesn't count at all because that's just how the time to kill numbers work. When you're firing your first shot, it takes 0 time to fire that first shot. So we start at 0, and therefore it's only the 2 shots we have to factor in here, and each of those shots with rapid fire, we save 7 milliseconds on. So in total, we're only saving 14 milliseconds in a perfect scenario with the Man of War if we're using rapid fire versus no rapid fire. While Call of Duty is really about milliseconds a lot of the time, 14 milliseconds isn't enough to save you in the average situation. But that's assuming a perfect scenario, and as we all know, none of us have absolutely perfect aim. A more realistic scenario is us firing like 6 to 9 shots, for instance. And in this scenario, we're saving 35 to 56 milliseconds. This is suddenly starting to become much more noticeable. Just think about how much latency you have in a game. If you have about a 50 millisecond latency difference between you and another player, that's relatively noticeable, so suddenly this is looking a little bit more viable when we're looking at those non-perfect situations. Looking at the Vesper on the other hand, where we only save 3 milliseconds per shot, in an average situation with the Vesper, we're looking at more like 8 to 11 shots to kill, roughly, due to the recoil and everything like that. This means in a practical situation, we're really only saving like 21 to 30 milliseconds at most with the Vesper, assuming we're missing a few shots, which we usually do. Therefore, I find it is a little bit more viable to run rapid fire on the lower fire rate full auto weapons rather than the higher fire rate full auto weapons. Another thing to keep in mind with this is what rapid fire does to your recoil. It makes it harder to control your recoil because your gun doesn't have as much time to recenter, and therefore a lot of times it's actually going to cause you to miss shots, especially with the higher fire rate guns, because the higher fire rate guns tend to have more recoil in the first place compared to the lower fire rate guns. So for me, if I happen to have an extra point, I will sometimes run rapid fire on the Man of War or the ICR, something with great accuracy to begin with, as well as a low fire rate. Those are the guns I like to use rapid fire on for full autos. I tend to avoid rapid fire on the higher fire rate guns. Moving on to the semi-autos, so the Shiva and the MX Garand. I guess you could also throw the Draken into this area as well. These ones have that low fire rate, so high fire time, and they typically don't have much for recoil, or they're able to recenter very, very quickly. And therefore, I do recommend running rapid fire if you have the extra attachment. So for instance, with the Shiva, we're actually saving 21 milliseconds between each one of our shots. And that's a noticeable amount, especially when you consider that that stacks every time you fire a shot. And let's be honest again, we're not always two-shotting people with the Shiva. Sometimes it's taking us 4 or 5 shots to get the kill, and every single time we take a shot, we're saving 21 milliseconds. Of course, this assumes that you can fire at that fire rate, but I find the average person can easily cap out the Shiva and even the MX Garand. So is it necessary on the semi-autos? Absolutely not, but it definitely helps a noticeable amount. Next up, we have a very difficult class of weapons to cover when it comes to rapid fire, and that is the burst guns. So first off, I want to let you guys know that originally, when the game first launched, rapid fire used to do something different to the burst guns. What it used to do is decrease the delay between each burst. A few months into the game though, that changed, and now it actually decreases the rate of fire within the burst itself. So your burst delay is exactly the same with or without rapid fire. Now, is it useful for the burst guns? It's very arguable. Personally, I really like using rapid fire on the XR2 because it just feels like I get my damage out in a much shorter window, and it's really all about getting that damage out really, really quickly within that small burst. And the XR2 kind of has a decently slow fire rate within the burst itself, so speeding that up definitely seems to help me get more consistent one burst kills, but it's really hard to support this with any sort of math. This could be a placebo effect. I know a lot of other people really do like running rapid fire on their burst guns, and this one I'm basically going to leave up to you guys. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you like running rapid fire on the burst guns, or do you think it's just completely a placebo effect? So finally, let's look at the really low fire rate semi-autos, or the guns that you have to actually rechamber between each shot. So we're looking at, first off, the KRM and the Argus. With both of these, you actually save 60 milliseconds between each shot with rapid fire. And this can definitely make the difference between life and death in a lot of situations. So if you've ever been in those situations where you get a hit marker on your first shot and you just have to try and rush that second shot out because your enemy is shooting you, this can actually save your life quite a bit. 60 milliseconds is quite noticeable in Call of Duty. Or if you run into 2 enemies, for instance, and you want to one-shot both of them, that 60 milliseconds definitely helps. As for the Locust, as well as the RSA interdiction, I thought I'd throw it in here because it gets the same reduction as the Locust. You actually save 64 milliseconds between each shot. So again, this can definitely make the difference between life and death, although I will say with sniper rifles, you're usually not in those really close situations where every single little millisecond counts. Normally you're hanging back a little bit more, so while it is more useful in a sense, it's also kind of less useful because you're in less pressured situations most of the time, I find. And finally, we have the biggest reduction of all of them, and that is the SVG. You actually save 84 milliseconds between each one of your shots while using rapid fire on the SVG. So again, if you happen to have that spare slot, it's not a bad choice to pop rapid fire on here, but then again, you typically aren't going to be running into those situations where every little millisecond counts. As for those 2 shotguns, the KRM as well as the Argus, I really like running rapid fire on these because a lot of the other attachments don't really do much to your shotguns. Like long barrel, for instance, it's pretty much useless, as you guys should probably know by now, on both the Argus as well as the KRM. So oftentimes I will pop rapid fire on there to save me that 60 milliseconds per shot. So there we have it. I finally got my breakdown done on rapid fire. This has been requested for quite a long time, but the whole math thing has been kind of daunting to me, so I finally broke it down today and was able to get this out for you. I really hope you guys learned something new about rapid fire in today's video, and I will talk to you guys next time.